Satori here with a knife video for you, and today we've got something pretty spectacular to check out together. This is the Custom Knife Factory Satori. It's a Peter Rosenti design built by Custom Knife Factory. Really incredible knife, guys. I've got to say, if you're at all a knife geek like I am, this is a fantastic knife. Super enjoyable to own and use and carry and experience. Just a phenomenal folder, okay? Now, I will say this, from a reviewer standpoint, as I'm trying to think through how I'm going to make this video, this is a tough knife to classify, okay? Is it a collector's item? Is it is it a budget alternative to a Rosenti custom? Is it a tactical folder? Is it a hard use folder? Do you look at it as like a regular old production knife? Where does this fit, and how do you kind of classify it in order to make some judgments about it? And that's a real challenge when it comes to this knife. Now, this one, by the way, happens to be sporting an At Purvis Blades clip, which is totally beautiful. Absolutely adds, I think, just what this knife needs. The plain black clip is fine. Certainly it's functional, and it doesn't do any damage to the design, but this clip really makes it pop. So I think that's an interesting and rather important part of this whole discussion. And so, the first thing I've got to say is I get that this knife is not going to be for everyone. All right. And that's part of what I was saying there when we talked about exactly where this fits. I would love to ask you guys this question. If you owned this knife, or let's just imagine this, you don't own the knife, but someone says to you, look, I've got this knife and it can go to anyone you'd like as a gift. So you've got to gift this to somebody. Who do you think would appreciate it? What kind of person would appreciate it? And if you know of specific names, probably not great to put them in the comments, but give me the personality type. Maybe your friend Joe would really love this for a particular reason, whatever. So I'd love to hear that down in the comments, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this knife, because it is a knife that I get is not going to appeal to everyone. It's going to have a fairly niche a fairly niche market, okay? And I totally understand that. And frankly, I'm part of that niche market, right? It's kind of a knife geek's knife. It really is. So let's go ahead and start off thinking about some of the things that could put someone off here. It's a large knife. Now, if you don't like large knives, and I love large knives. The bigger the better is generally my motto when it comes to knives. However, this is exceptionally large and heavy. And so it's actually to the point where it's not super practical to carry and use this as an EDC knife. It's actually that big. Okay, I would almost put this in a similar category to my Cold Steel 4MAX, where it's definitely an occasional carry type of knife. And this becomes, even gets in a slightly different category because there's some other things going on here, like blade grind and cost and things like that perhaps make it a little even less practical than the 4MAX, which, by the way, the 4MAX is a fantastic knife, extremely useful as a cutting tool, in addition to being big and crazy and overbuilt and all of that good stuff. So size and weight alone is going to put some people off. This is over 9 inches. It weighs like 8 ounces. Okay, so there's a lot of things here that could potentially put people off. The next thing here is the blade. Now, this blade is beautiful. When you look at that as it catches the light, the stonewash on the, now I will say this, I would kind of like to see this, to have this reversed. So the stonewash was here on the flats and the bevels were satin, but even the way it's done is totally beautiful. And I love the compound grind here. I love the fuller. This blade is really unique and really cool. M390 steel, by the way. Now, it's pretty thick blade stock and it's a pretty thick grind all around. So this is probably not the knife you want for slicing up apples. But again, I don't think a lot of people are buying this as a practical sort of utility cutting tool. I just kind of doubt that they are. Maybe some people, but for the most part, I think people are buying this because they appreciate the art of it and the construction of it. Although, let me say, if you already own, this crazy high-end Rosenti and you want something to sort of hold its place as a user, I get that too. Okay, so that's the blade. A beautiful blade. It is functional, by the way. It's not that this is so artistic that it doesn't work. It works great. It's a nice blade. It's in good steel, nice edge, a little thick in terms of the grind here. Not so much back here where it's a hollow grind and it's a little thinner behind the edge, but still probably not the most practical blade out there. The action I will say is pretty enjoyable. It finger flicks out very nicely. It deploys via flipper reliably. Okay, I've never been able to like half flip it or something because it is nice and smooth. I will say, there you go. I can get a half flip if I really try. Let's see. Hold on. Yeah, there you go. So I can partially deploy it, but generally speaking, when I want this knife to open, it does open pretty reliably. It is extremely smooth. The lock bar is very accessible and comfortable. The flipper is comfortable. Even the fuller there that I can use to spidey flick it is very nice. So in terms of deploying this knife and you know, sort of fondling this knife, it's very, very comfortable, very usable. I have no problems whatsoever with any of that. I would like to see a slightly stiffer detent, but that's, you know, that's not a huge issue. I love everything else about this knife so much that I'm happy with the detent as it is. And everything else about the action is so dialed in that I really, really do enjoy this knife from that standpoint. Heavy blade, you got to kind of watch. So I'll try and show you guys, you know, it does drop shut pretty quickly. And that's largely because this is a big, heavy chunk of M390 steel. Okay, there you go. But yeah, very usable, very comfortable. And that, you know, you're not going to get, I'm sure all of us have had knives where, you know, if you're kind of not thinking about it and you flip it over and over again through a day, you start to get some soreness on your digits a little bit. Not happening with this knife at all. Everything is comfortable and very usable in terms of the action. And it's about what you would expect from a high-end knife like this, with the exception of that detent, which is just a little soft. Okay. With the handle here, we've got this big, crazy handle, beautifully built as an integral, which I do love. We've got that Coke bottle design that Peter Rossetti is kind of famous for, which I think is really, really cool. And it's nice to get that in this knife. I think that's part of what people are looking for when they buy a Rossetti collaboration. Nicely done in terms of how they've carried off the lanyard hole back here. And then of course, this perfect clip. Now it is single position clip. For those of you who are lefties, yeah, you don't really have a good option here. But being an integral does add size does add weight and certainly adds cost. Okay, so even that could be a little off-putting. So as I say, you know, one of the themes I think that comes through as we look at every part of this knife is not everyone is going to like this. All right, some people I think are going to love it. All right, and others are going to be a little put off. I will say I've got one more critique since we're on those lines. I love this clip. It is spectacular. But I have to say this, whenever I'm carrying this knife, and whenever I'm carrying a knife with a fancy clip in general, I feel like the clip is the worst thing to you know, dress up. Because it's the one part of the knife that's always exposed, right? It's out of your pocket. It's what's going to bang on doorknobs and rub against walls and catch on your car door and all that kind of stuff, where the rest of the knife is kind of nicely protected in your pocket. So, you know, maybe a pivot collar or something is a little more practical way to add some visual interest to a knife, or add some fancy materials. Okay. Now, having said that, you know, now that we've kind of gone through all of these different features and how the knife works overall, I have to say that I love this knife. It is fantastic. It's beautiful. It's incredibly fun to carry. The pride of ownership is like off the charts with this knife. It's you know, just having this around and having it in your pocket from time to time just brings a smile to your face. It really, really does. Not only that, but having a Peter Rossetti design, and really this build from Custom Knife Factory is going to be, you know, in terms of performance and smoothness and fit and finish and all of that, you know, it's going to give you that custom knife experience, no doubt. All right. And so this is really a spectacular folding knife. And it just is one of those knives that as I say, I get, if I show this to, you know, one of the guys on the fire department, they're going to be impressed by it, right? They're going to be like, whoa, that's a crazy knife. But they're not going to appreciate all that this knife brings to the table. They aren't. All right, this is really a knife built for knife guys. Okay, it's very well built. I think Custom Knife Factory has done a fantastic job, and they always do. I think I've reviewed, I don't know, 6 or 8 knives from Custom Knife Factory. I've never had one that wasn't pretty stinking impressive in terms of how it, fit and finish and deployment and smoothness and all of those things where detail matters. Okay, it's well done along those lines. Now, having gone through all of this discussion, I want to bring into some comparisons because I think there are knives that people are going to look at this and go, why wouldn't you just get X, Y, or Z? Now, first of all, this is really not part of the comparison, but I'm going to bring this in just because everyone is familiar with the Para 2, and this will give you an idea just how large this knife really is. It is a big, big knife. Okay, now thinking of, if you want a high-end user, you're hard pressed to find anything better than the Inkosi, right? I love Chris Reeve knives. I mean, you could say the same about the 25 or the 21, or I suppose now the 31. Um, uh, for me, out of the available options that I listed, there's a reason that I own this particular one and this version. I've been wanting a black micarta version of the Inkosi for a while now, so I'm pretty stoked to have this in the collection. And by the way, it makes a great comparison, right? You can sort of, everyone's familiar with this design and with the size and the handle shape and everything like that, so that makes for a pretty good connection as well. Let's move that guy out of the way, and let's bring in a few knives. Now, all the other knives, we'll do one more. This will be one more that's maybe not as comparable because of the size. But I will say this, all right, if you're looking for a high-end hard use knife, okay, both of these would fall into that category. This one's probably a little more usable. Certainly the price point on this guy is going to be a little more affordable. Especially these days, these can be a little hard to get your hands on, where hinderers tend to be maybe a little more manageable. But I've got to bring this knife in. Okay, now you may feel like, what the heck is an $80 knife? I guess this is like $100 and something knife because it's the Warriors and Wonders exclusive. But what is a $110 knife doing beside a $550 knife? Or I guess this knife probably, with the clip that goes for, I don't know, $140 or something, is probably sitting around $600 or a little more than that. So what do these two have in common? Well, here's what they have in common. If you are just looking for a heavy duty, hard use tactical folder, this is the way to go, okay? There's no reason to spend the kind of money this goes for. There's no reason to look for the kind of fit and finish and fine details that this knife has for a hard use sort of user, sort of, just a tactical heavy duty folder. This is absolutely perfect, okay? So that was one of the reasons I wanted to bring that knife in. I've got another knife that fills a similar role, and that is this. This is the Spyderco Amalgam. I love the Spyderco Amalgam. Again, a little more refined than the Recon 1, and a whole lot of fun to use for sure. Not quite in the same category as this, but again, if you're watching this going, Kevin, this is insane. Well, this is way less insane, so maybe this is a little more appealing to you. Now, let's get to some knives that are perhaps a little more comparable. I've got one more that I want to bring in because if what you're looking for is just a fantastic, refined, just a knife that gets all the details right, if you want a high-end knife and what you're interested in is just a fantastic action and for fantastic attention to detail and fantastic fit and finish, this is a great option, or a number of other Riot knives if you don't like the particular size of this one. But this is my favorite Riot for sure. And in terms of quality, compares very closely to this. What else have we got? This is my Benchmade Crooked River, and this is a little different than the average Crooked River. I've got the forged carbon fiber scales and pivot collar here, and then I've got that nice blue pop of color on the back. I have another backspacer here that matches with everything else, but I like the blue, so that's what we go with. What else? Oh yeah, here's a knife that is similar in size, but does and similar in overall quality. This is the WE 037. This is a knife that has a lot of the size and a lot of the detail that's really interesting about this knife, but this knife weighs about half as much. It has a blade that slices like a demon, and it has ergonomics that are some of the most perfect ergonomics I've ever felt in a folding knife. Okay, so really, really great option there. And then finally, probably the most comparable knife that I have in my collection to the Satori has got to be the F3. This is a full custom, and well, it's considered a custom knife because they are made by Dave Curtis. They're similar in that, you know, they're both CNC cut and water jetted and stuff like that. So the construction process on these is fairly similar. The difference is this is kind of done in a large shop by a bunch of people, and maybe this is done by Dave. Okay, so but I do want to point out that these are close to the same price. I think this probably retails for, I don't know, $650, $700. So there's a pretty comparable price point here, very comparable in size. The Curtis is about the same weight. They're very, very close together in terms of weight. I would say the Curtis is a little more practical, a little more of a user than the Satori, but very comparable. Once again, compound grind, all that kind of stuff going on. So wanted to bring that guy in as one last comparison. So I hope you've enjoyed that portion of the video. I think this is a knife that really makes for some interesting comparisons because of the, as I keep saying, that weird place where it lands, where it's not a custom, it's not a production, it's not a hard use or a tactical knife only. It's a kind of a collector's item, kind of not. All right, so there's a lot of cool things going on here, and I hope you enjoyed that comparison part. There were a lot of knives that this kind of makes me identify with or brings to mind. Now, overall, I think you guys are probably able to pretty well figure out where I'm going with this. Do I like this knife? Yes. I adore this knife. It is spectacular. It's enjoyable. It's a knife I just like to pick up and look at. It makes me excited every time I see it. It's just a phenomenal, phenomenal knife. It really is. But, well, all of that is true for me. I totally understand that this is not going to be a knife for everybody, and certainly that's probably good because there are only about 200 of these out there, and even less if you consider that there's that Adam Purvis clip on there. So this is not a knife that's easily available, especially compared to lots of the other knives that I've shown you. So hopefully between this and all of those other knives, you've gotten maybe some inspiration and you've found some joy out of this video. I will put a link to DLT Trading, and I'll put a link to Custom Knife Factory as well. They don't have this knife, but maybe some of you have got the deep enough pockets to go ahead and pick up one of the snafus that are going to be coming out fairly soon. All right, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I really would love to hear your comments about the questions I've asked along the way. We'll talk to you soon.